I just wanted to give a quick update to the video I put out mapping the defeat of Russia's Arctic troops in Ukraine. That video maps the journey of Russia's 200th Arctic Motor Rifle Brigade from the pre-war to its defeat north of Kharkiv. New original reporting has come out on the 200th, published by the Washington Post on the 16th of December. I've linked both that article and my original video in the description. To recap events, the 200th Arctic Brigade is a specialized mechanized infantry brigade stationed in the Arctic Circle. Starting around January 24th, the brigade was moved by train from its Arctic garrison to a training area east of Kursk. It's now been confirmed it deployed 2 battalion tactical groups, each likely consisting of a motor rifle battalion reinforced by a tank company, artillery, and other assets. After detraining, they exercised for about 20 days, before conducting a road movement towards Rakitna closer to the Ukrainian border on February 19th. This march was heavily documented by passers-by, but there was a footage blackout thereafter. The Washington Post article states the 200th commenced their cross-border assault from Malinovka along Route E105, implying an additional movement between the 19th and the 24th. According to the Washington Post, the soldiers of the 200th still believed they were conducting drills at this time, and weren't informed they would be entering combat until 3 a.m. in the early morning of the invasion. After crossing the border, the 200th Brigade was engaged by Ukrainian territorial defense militias and mechanized infantry north of Kharkiv, and were stopped short of entering the city. Although it's not stated in the article, based on the locations of abandoned equipment, I speculate that the brigade initially traveled along 2 main axes. One along Route E105 towards Pytomnik, which would have been the element that tried to cut the junction of E40 and Lesia Suryuka Street, and another along T2117 towards Derhachi. The Royal United Services Institute's preliminary lessons from the conflict state that Russian units had been ordered to advance an administrative column by road and to attempt to bypass any initial resistance. The intent was to capture key points before Ukraine could mobilize, and transition to stability operations by the 10th day. A column march is one of the fastest ways to move, but moving fast with little security led to some pretty predictable outcomes on the first day. Additionally, it's now been confirmed that Colonel Denis Kurylo, the brigade's commander, was not killed as reported in March. In my first video, I referenced Ukraine's claim of his death, but was skeptical due to the lack of evidence. Turns out, the Ukrainians had good reason to believe they killed him. Kurylo was severely injured in a strike on his vehicle, leaving him with a traumatic brain injury that required hospitalization. Internal brigade documents reveal that the colonel was hospitalized at least in late April, and his wife confirmed that he'd stopped serving with the unit around that period. After being badly beaten, the brigade withdrew across the border into Russia sometime in May, and in June it was reported in Russian media that the brigade would be reinforced by a mixed group of volunteers consisting of Northern Fleet sailors, rear echelon personnel, and coastal defense units. The Washington Post reports that out of the estimated 1,400 to 1,600 soldiers that the 200th Brigade entered Ukraine with, only 892 were left, a handful of which required hospitalization or otherwise refused to fight. The internal documents, however, don't include exact figures of the killed or wounded in action. However, the Washington Post does reference that 1,274 schoolchildren in Murmansk now qualify for free meals due to their parents being either killed or wounded in Ukraine. The 80th Arctic and 61st Naval Infantry Brigades, also garrisoned in Murmansk, have also deployed to Ukraine. But after their brief rest south of Belgorod, the 200th was soon redeployed north of Kharkiv near the Russian border sometime in June. Ukrainian forces noted an uptick in effectiveness and discipline when compared to eastern Ukrainian separatists, especially in the realm of fires, although this discipline soon degraded heading into July. The 200th was one of the units that was pushed back in the vicinity of Kupiansk during Ukraine's September counteroffensive east of Kharkiv. Now, the brigade is left battered somewhere in Luhansk, possibly down to reduced battalion strength, low in morale, and heavily backfilled by conscripts and other repurposed personnel. This is based on Washington Post interviews with the veterans of the 200th and conscripts who have been backfilling it, as well as signal intercepts passed on to the agency by the Ukrainians. If you want to get a more detailed look at the first weeks of the 200th Arctic Brigade's downfall in Ukraine, check out my first video on that topic. I'll see you over there.